what's the exciting either early tea or random snack you've pulled out this evening, Mr. Botwright?
2 bourbon biscuits to go along with the most disgusting strongbow I've ever tasted in my life.
Chocolate and strongbow. Well, it's not going to be doing either of those foodstuffs any fucking favours, is it? Let's be honest here.
Well, it's strongbow called dark fruit.
Oh, good God, man.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, okay?
To be fair,
Apples,
strongbow is
cider, end of story.
Strongbow is quite broken. Let's face it, strongbow exists because it has the highest specific ABV to price.
I was going to say,
of anything in a pub.
As soon as it goes below £4 for a 4-pack, that's fine by me.
Right, yeah, let's talk about that later.
Yeah, all right, fine.
We ready?
You're wasting gold.
Yeah, cool.
Is that euphemism for pissing strong?
All right, let's get started. Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 19th of March 2014, and joining me on this edition is Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
1 gay beer for my gay friend, 1 normal beer for me because I am normal.
Really? Games Editor Mark Botwright.
We shall strike a balance between culture and fun.
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
Purgatory's kind of like the in-betweeny one. You weren't really shit, but you weren't all that great either. Like Tottenham.
Okay, let's kick off with some Twitter fun. So Steve, explain this one. Actor Wayne Knight, he's the guy that was in Jurassic Park and Seinfeld, the fat guy. Basically somebody said he was dead, IMDb changed the profile to say he's dead, and then he came on Twitter to say otherwise.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not been a great couple of months in terms of actors popping their clogs legitimately. Obviously, we've had Philip Seymour Hoffman recently. We had Paul Walker dying quite tragically in a car crash just before Christmas. And then the weekend, it became, someone, I guess the rumour started on Twitter, but apparently someone said that he had been killed, Wayne Knight had been killed in a car accident. And everyone was starting to mention their commiserations and eulogies. And then IMDb actually updated their website to say died on Saturday. At which point, Wayne Knight had to go onto Twitter and say, "No, I'm not dead. I'm still quite alive. Unfortunately, it seems to have disappointed some of you, but I am still around." And I guess it just goes to show that in the modern age, with social networking, rumours, even ones that aren't true, get around really quickly.
I've got to find nowadays that when I see something pop up on Twitter, the first place I check is proper news sites.
Yes.
I'll go and check Associated Press and the BBC just to double check before taking in anything that's on Twitter. It is a problem, Ed, isn't it? It's one that's come up a number of times now.
Yes, and it gets worse and worse and worse as you've got a complete. I'm going to sound old now, but you've got a complete generation of people who don't seem to examine fact in the same way that perhaps that we used to. All news sources are apparently created equal in the eyes of some people, and they'll just spout off on the craziest sites. I have to say, it all seems quite. Looking at the backstory as well, which I have to be honest, forced me to go to the Mail Online site, which I'm not happy about with you with us. I mean, that's pretty grim. Died in a car crash. I was looking at, let's face it, Wayne Knight, he's not the sveltest human being. If it was like had a massive coronary or, was in a hot dog eating contest and then, moved on to the other side, that just seems more legit than just random car accident. But obviously it's sort of irrelevant because he's not dead. I mean, he should have gone and gone, he didn't say the magic word. Something like that, really, for just added dramatic effect. But obviously, presumably he was just busy pointing out that he's not dead.
I did describe him to Phil as the fat bloke in Jurassic Park, but obviously he's more famous, I guess, for playing Newman in Seinfeld.
Only to you. As I say, I looked at him and went, "Oh, it's Dennis Nedry." I have no idea. I've never really watched Seinfeld, so that was kind of an irrelevance. But no, Dennis Nedry, that's who he is.
Well, I suppose, yeah. If you got like Paul Walker, dying in a car crash, given that he'd made his name in the Fast and Furious films, that wasn't entirely a surprise.
So Wayne Knight needs to be eaten by a dinosaur.
Yeah, well, if you have to die in some way that reflects your film career, he needs to get eaten by a dinosaur. Blinded by it and then eaten by it.
life imitating art imitating life, so on and so forth, not unheralded. But I mean, it must be said, if as an actor you can only die in a way that
you died on screen,
befits the roles that you've done. I mean, certain actors would be laughing all the way at the bank, really. I mean, it's like Patrick Stewart can only really die if he's killed by a mutant or his spaceship suffers from fatal decompression issues. That would be quite handy. He'd be effectively immortal.
Or if you're Ian McKellen, you can just come back a couple of times, no problem. Any actor that's played Jesus is laughing. Well, apart from the crucifixion.
I was going to say, not laughing.
Not necessarily singing "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life," either.
But I guess it's just a sign of the times, isn't it, really? That you have to go on Twitter now to tell people that you're not dead after rumour starts that you are.
At least the internet permits you to point out that you're not dead. Curious historical fact. In 1904, the Russians and the Japanese had an enormous naval battle off the Pacific island of Tsushima. And the Russian admiral that commanded the fleet, he was soundly beaten, but he didn't die in the action at all. And he returned to Russia and was sufficiently forgotten about that he received an invitation to his own memorial service. And he didn't have the luxury of Twitter to go, actually, do you know what? I'm not actually dead. So look on the bright side. It could be a lot worse.
Yeah.
No publicity is bad publicity.
That's very true. You never know, he might get a film role out of this now that his name's been bandied about. Oh yeah, he's still alive. Well, let's get him.
See, I often suspect a mischievous publicist somewhere.
Yeah, well.
It's very hard to work out where viral marketing ends and abject bullshit begins. So,
and public stupidity takes over. I just remembered his other famous role, which is he's the sweaty police officer who gets all worked up about Sharon Stone's lack of knickers.
Yes, that's very true.
Seen and base against it.
Yes, the over-the-top beaver shot.
Is that a technical term?
Yeah, I'm just waiting on news outlets like Sky reporting that Lord Lucan was on flight MH370, the missing Malaysian flight.
Oh, I tell you what, the spiralling out of control of this is now going in two directions. The tinfoil hat collective are rapidly disappearing into a vortex of idiocy, which is impossible to follow.
Are you trying to suggest it's not aliens? Because I'm pretty sure it is. I mean, that's the only explanation. When you've eliminated all the other explanations, the only one left is the explanation.
This is completely true, but nonetheless, for the moment, I'm going to suggest terrestrial causes. Unlike that bloke in that history program, Ancient Aliens, and there's that meme. It's like, I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens, and there's some cracking pictures for that. But at the other end of it, obviously, and as a bad person, I pay perhaps more attention to this. The bizarrely tasteless stuff appearing at the darker sides of the internet. I mean, obviously, someone put an advert for a used Boeing 777 on the Vietnam Craigslist. Darkly brilliant, if I'm completely honest, but not in the best of taste. And the other one doing the rounds is a picture of MH370 with Hide and Seek Champion 2014.
Well, I mean, taking a serious quick look at this, I mean, technology-wise, because we're supposed to talk about tech, so let's talk about a little bit of tech. With all the technology that we have, I mean, the Americans were saying from day one that, it wasn't flying on that course. It turned around. It was off on some other course. They'd been able to track it and were ignored. Obviously, a lot of politics in that. But if you think about the technology that is available, that was on the aircraft as well, and the complexity of that to turn it all off, as is suggested, you can see why the Tin Hat Brigade are up in arms and coming out with all sorts of theories, because it is a little bit strange, Ed.
It's very strange, but by the same token, I think as much as anything else, it actually demonstrates an astonishing complacency. Obviously, we're both big fans of air crash investigation. And one of the things that crops up repeatedly is these days, the term radar is interchangeable with actually looking at a return signal from the plane or object that you're tracking by radar and getting a return signal from a transponder. And it's not necessarily clear where one ends and one begins on this. As I understand it, these planes are tremendously complicated, but they still have basically a circuit breaker board accessible to the flight crew where you can turn off large portions of some of the circuitry for the plane. And it's been done. There was the Silk Air crash, which was pilot suicide, where there's strong evidence that the guy just disabled CVR, transponder, a couple of other things before sticking the plane into the ground. And that astonishing incident with the FedEx plane with Auburn Callaway, who tried to murder the flight crew as a jumpsuit passenger, tried to murder them with a hammer, and he kept trying to trip the flight data recorder circuit breaker so the plane wasn't recording the data correctly. So because of the nature of having to service these things and keep them in the air as often as possible, these functions are accessible, and if someone knows what they're doing, you can turn off. And this is where I think it gets complicated, because I think the plane's transponder might be turned off, but it might be harder to I mean, it seems clear that the engines were sending data for hours and hours and hours, but unfortunately not necessarily where they were, simply what they were doing. So it's as if the location data was turned off, but because the plane kept flying, some of the other telemetry continued to be sent. But it just highlights the fact that we're kind of reliant that we just accept that transponders keep transponding, all the other data keeps being sent as before. If you actually have to track something, without the benefit of it telling you what it is, I don't think it's as easy as especially over more isolated stretches of water. I don't think it's anything like as easy as we kind of assume it to be.
I just don't get the whole furore about this. You remember the Air France flight from Rio de Janeiro?
Yeah.
It disappeared. It took, was it a week and a half, 2 weeks to find the wreckage on that? But there wasn't the whole press furore that seems to be happening at the minute.
I don't know. I think they found some wreckage reasonably quickly. No, it hit the ground. It hit the ground in one piece. It hit the ground. It hit the water in one piece. It flat stalled into the water. But it flat stalled.
Is that the one where the front blew off and it went up and up and up and then came
down?
No,
that was TWA 800. That was a TWA flight, and that was a long time ago. We're talking about the Air France flight from 2 or 3 years ago from Rio.
South America.
It disappeared in strong. Well, they thought it was strong turbulence, but what had actually happened was that the replacement flight crew didn't know what they were doing, and instead of getting the plane out of a stall,
I've seen that.
They pulled the nose up and continued to stall until the captain came in, and he came in too late to realise what was going on, and it hit the water.
Yeah.
But there wasn't the same, desperate search and all the rest that I remember around that one that there is around this Malaysian one. It seems to be really strange.
I'm sure they found certain evidence of a crash quicker than 10. I think it took ages to find identifiable wreckage, but they found a debris field comparatively quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it seems incredible in this day and age that a plane, a modern aircraft, can just disappear.
I don't know. I think that's a conceit where we think that the planet is far smaller than it actually is.
No, but what I mean is, it was still traveling for 6 hours, but certain elements of the plane had been turned off or they weren't transmitting.
Well, that's what they think.
And you can think, okay, if someone disabled that, for what reason? Was it some kind of elaborate suicide, in which case, like the Egyptian air pilot, what a thoughtless bastard for doing that. Or if it's a hijacking, where is it? And what was the point? If you're just going to blow the plane up, if you're kind of a terrorist, you don't bother with all those elaborate schemes.
Well, no, you'd also come forward. You have to do something visually spectacular, and the very nature of this is that it's not visually spectacular. But do remember, because this cropped up when people were going, "Oh, how do you lose something which is constantly transmitting?" Earlier this century, that makes it sound weirdly long ago, but it's not that long. Sort of 2002, 2003 time. Two people stole a Boeing 727 with slightly less sophisticated but nonetheless present and active transponders, and that plane has never been found. Either debris, wreckage, or the plane itself. It vanished off the face of the earth. It's not impossible to do.
But also, you got 230 passengers on the plane, and no one picked up their airphone or something. They just rang up and said, "Look, we've been hijacked and we're flying in completely the wrong direction."
I'm sure the airphone comes under the same transponder, same circuit breaker board as everything else.
And you can't use a mobile 3 miles up either. So,
how much air crash investigations do you guys watch?
Oh,
I watch a lot.
Are you part of some kind of reenactment society? Or
No.
The best reenactment society in the history of ever.
No,
that is the one good thing about this whole event. When they finally do work out what the hell happened to it, you're in for one hell of an episode of crash investigation, aren't you?
It's going to be a 2-part special.
Obviously, we're not. We are thinking about the people that were on there. And it is, if it has crashed, it is a tragedy to 230 odd families. So we're not making light of the situation.
If you want to put some perspective into it, though, since the plane disappeared, 46 million people have flown and been delivered successfully to their destinations. So let's face it, the odds are still pretty much on your side. So
yeah. You've actually more chance of winning the lottery.
Which I didn't do,
no,
again.
No, £5.40 I got.
Hey,
and some lucky Brit got 108 million. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's walking around money.
Yeah, that is. Right, okay, let's move on quickly. Panasonic have launched a Freetime service. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to go to the press launch, but we'll have all the details through Steve. So quickly, what is Freetime service? I'm sure we'll find out more next week.
Basically, Freetime is FreeSat's catch-up service. So Panasonic are adding this to their TVs that have FreeSat tuners. And clearly, it's an attempt on their part, I guess, to circumnavigate the current exclusivity of ITV Player in particular, which has an exclusivity deal with Samsung. So Samsung are the only TVs currently that offer all the catch-up services on their TVs. No one else can until their ITV Player deal is up. But this, I guess, is a clever way of circumventing it if you have a FreeSat, if you use FreeSat itself and a Panasonic TV. I don't think, or at least it's not made clear in their press release, whether you can do that with aerials as well. I think it's just through satellite with FreeSat. So I guess it's a useful feature if you've got a Panasonic TV and you use FreeSat.
Wouldn't that deal be kind of more that Samsung still carried kind of more weight if it was anything other than ITV Player?
Well, in my case, definitely, yeah, because I watch ITV anyway.
Service which we have kind of successfully lived without. Oh no, I'm missing out on Coronation Street.
Yeah, I mean this would be a good deal if it wasn't FreeSat. I
get the impression people are using that less and less and less.
But I don't know anybody that uses FreeSat. I mean, if you use FreeSat and you listen to the podcast, then tell us underneath the podcast in the podcast forum. But I'm not aware of anybody that uses FreeSat, and I've only ever tested one TV by taking the satellite feed from my Skybox and using it because it's the same alignment. But you'd still have to get the satellite fixed, and it's a strange way of getting your free TV, to be honest.
Have you had your Sky follow-up call yet?
No.
So you're still on to cancel?
Yeah, I am, and obviously I cut this bit out of last week's podcast, so nobody will know what you're talking about.
Oh, sorry.
But just to bring everybody up to date, yes, I had a bit of a falling out with Sky because my Skybox stopped working, and they wouldn't replace it, even though I'd been a customer for 20-odd years, and they give them away free to new customers. They would not reward my loyalty and the fact that I pay an absolute fortune every month by replacing my box, so I cancelled, and I haven't had any follow-up ed.
Right.
So they obviously don't want my custom.
Yep,
no, apparently not. That is pretty... I have to say, I do find that very, very surprising.
Yes, I do as well, but I'm sure Roku will be happy with the new customer. Because I am going to buy one on payday.
Excellent. But you are presumably going to get one last new Wheeler dealers in this evening.
Oh, I forgot that was on. Oh, I forgot fifth gear as well, having to set my Skybox up. Another thing that Sky did... still do is a 3D channel, which is more than what Sony will be doing. Brilliant segue that
was
nice.
Very well done.
Okay, so Sony pulled the plug on their 3D experience content, which is on their smart platform, Steve. No real surprises there, but their reasoning was a little bit strange, them saying, well, there's more 3D content available in other forms, so we're going to stop this.
Well, I can understand the logic to a degree, because certainly when the manufacturers, and I believe both LG and Samsung also did this on their smart TV platforms, is by adding 3D content in the early days of 3D when there wasn't very much content around. It did sort of give people a chance to see what it was like. Now, there are quite a lot of 3D Blu-rays available. I mean, hundreds. So, there is a fair bit of 3D content knocking about. Obviously, there isn't as much aired content now. I mean, since BBC have stopped doing it, but there is still some Sky content. So I can see the argument, but I think it's probably more indicative of the fact that 3D is largely has been a failure, obviously, and people are largely apathetic towards it. So why bother continuing? I noticed, interestingly, that the new film Noah that comes out in a couple of weeks' time is being released in 2D and 3D in most countries, but not in the US and the UK, Australia and France, because apparently those markets just aren't interested in 3D, whereas it's still incredibly popular in places like Asia, where 3D is a big driver of revenues. So, I think it's probably indicative of the fact that both there is more content available and the fact that most people aren't that interested anyway.
I would go with the latter there. I don't think people are interested. The only exceptions are Avatar and Gravity, really, for watching something in the cinema in 3D that was popular. And on Blu-ray, Gravity was the fastest selling 3D Blu-ray, but they didn't actually tell us.
My wife bought a copy, and actually I unwrapped a pair of my TV's 3D glasses so she could watch Gravity in 3D on Saturday night. It's a mark of how excited I am towards the prospect of 3D that I took my son upstairs, read him a story, and he fell asleep, and I just pissed about on the internet. It doesn't help that Withers sort of gave away the ending.
Well, I mean, the big new hope was gaming. This is where 3D was going to be huge, and if you remember back, Steve, to all the stands at CES and other shows, there was a big emphasis on 3D gaming. So, Mark, has it made its impact?
No. That's the long and the short answer.
Mark? Why did it fail so? I mean, it failed. I mean, if you think about it, when we talk about it, 3D failed in terms of movies and TV. Yes, it did. But I mean, it absolutely categorically failed in terms of gaming. I mean, there's hardly any 3D games, and no one games in 3D, as far as I'm aware. Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, why was an area where I thought it would be incredibly strong, massive failure?
Well, I thought it might be strong there as well, simply because you think that in movies terms it might be, should we say, more leaning towards CG stuff, sci-fi, that kind of thing. So you're perfectly within the realms of gaming altogether there. I think it was just lack of content. You had a lack of content. You needed a big push to make people really recognise it. It was even out there. I think was it Uncharted 3 was pushed with the 3D tag. But beyond that, there was just so little, and people just didn't really realise that it was there.
Yeah, but it's strange that Oculus Rift I'll say that again.
Oculus Rift.
Oculus Rift seems to be changing that perception, and everybody that I know that's tried it has said, you've got to see this, it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's your virtual reality, though. So therefore, that you're moving into a slightly different sphere there. I mean, can we get on to Sony and their VR headset?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, Sony is set to hopefully reveal their VR headset at GDC, the Games Developers Conference. It's one of those things that's been rumoured for a while that it would be kind of unveiled at some point. Now it finally seems as if it's going to be coming out. There's going to be a big speech driving the future of innovation on Tuesday, so that would be yesterday, if we're talking today, and we're pretending today's Wednesday. R&D bigwigs from Sony, Richard Marks and Anton Mikolov, are going to be hosting it. They were behind they worked on the PlayStation Eye and Move controller as well. It's said to be better than first generation Oculus Rift, those dev kits, and similar to the latest Crystal Cove iteration. So it definitely seems like Sony are moving in that direction as well. But there again, having said that, they have had things like head-mounted displays for some number of years now, and they've hardly set the world alight. Yeah,
which is a shame, because we tested CES 4 years ago.
Yeah.
When they first came out, we got to sit down on the chair and actually test them out, and they were really good. But there's been no interest for them.
Sorry, Mark, to be clear, this isn't Richard Marks who sang Right Here Waiting for You, singer-songwriter of
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Sorry, my ears pricked up. Richard Marks? Oh, brilliant. Okay, but probably not the same guy.
I'm doubting it somehow. But if he has, then he's done well for himself there.
It pays to diversify.
I'm sure there's more than one Richard Marks in the world.
I'm sure there is too, but it's nice to pretend.
No, but yeah, I mean, they've had these head-mounted displays for a while, but again, similar to 3D, it all comes down to content. As soon as you step into the realm of VR, it's not simply a case of tweaking existing games and throwing that in. There are particular genres that it tends to work better with. Things like cars and cockpit views, that kind of thing. Lots of problems with motion sickness and certainly with things like control method. Some people feel that something like the traditional joypad won't be sufficient for what you want. You will want something motion control to go along with it. So there are various hurdles there, but the key one is going to be exactly the same as with 3D, which is no one's going to really want just reworked content. You need something designed around it.
Yeah, well,
good.
that's a good point.
So I was going to say the other key thing is obviously going to be pricing, because the headsets that we've seen to date, Phil, have been like £1,000 or above, more than that. Now, this headset's designed to be used with the PS4. You can't be selling a headset that costs 3 times as much as the player.
I would qualify that you can't be selling only one headset at that price. I would say that there's a bizarre mileage in having a Halo product, not referencing the game, just as an aspirational one, and then one or two more sensibly priced ones below that point. There's definite mileage in having something which people of that interested in the category aspire to its existence. Definitely, even if you don't then sell many of them. Great, I can pretend to be Pierce Brosnan in Lawnmower Man. That's probably not the best example, but it's the only example I could think of. But yeah, it just gives you a sense of what's what you can aspire to.
There are surprisingly few virtual reality films, actually, now you mention it, Ed. I'm trying to think of other examples. Johnny Mnemonic.
There was a good episode of Merge
where his storage is the storage of Keanu Reeves' head is less than the actual storage I have in my house now, which I suppose may or may not be apt. But
and there was what was that film? Oh, Disclosure. They had the VR filing system in that, which was became a major plot point within the film, and now looks hideously outdated.
Okay, so moving on from VR headsets, we're talking about games, so we may as well continue talking about games. Xbox One Titanfall sales boost.
Yep, touting a big 96% sales leap, which sounds absolutely fantastic. Couple of kind of minor caveats to go with this, which is I think it's weekly, and also it's obviously with Titanfall being bundled in, there are going to be huge amounts of people who would want to buy the Titanfall bundle, will wait until Titanfall has come out, and so therefore it kind of drops what people will be spending the week before and bumps it the week after. So it's a great good news story, but it does show. I mean, Titanfall's jumped straight in at number 1 in the games charts, and so obviously bundled copies help boost that massively. I think NAC, when it was bundled with the PS4, similarly rose a lot higher than, should we say, reviews or consumer enthusiasm should have seen it. It's just good value. They've dropped now the Titanfall bundle. You can pick up an Xbox One with Titanfall for under £400, so it doesn't seem that much of a shock to the system anymore if you take into account a PS4 plus a game. The games, still aren't dropping. Certainly high street prices less than kind of £50. You're lucky if you can find anything around £40. Certainly for a new release. So yeah, it's all round. It's pretty good news for UK Xbox One sales.
Can I just say as well, another gold star to Microsoft, a cracking TV spot.
Oh, isn't it fantastic?
It's what a nicely implemented crazy idea, because it gives you a little insight into the game without labouring the point, and it's cool, it's light-hearted, and it's the right length as well. Really nicely done. Bravo.
I have not seen the advert you're talking about.
Me and my shadow.
You just don't watch enough television, do you?
No, I don't watch any television.
Especially lower down the dials where advertising is cheap.
I don't watch television with advertising if I can help it. Or if I do, I always record it and then skip the adverts. So.
See, this is the world of the PVR, isn't it? This is the generation which will grow up without being able to hum the Cocoa Pops advert.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it's
we've had this conversation before, but TV is changing fundamentally. And my parents have just got I don't want to go into detail here, actually, because I'm not sure how legal it all is in Spain, but they got what was effectively a Roku box, which provides streaming content. And they're in their 70s, and they've totally got into the whole idea of streaming, watching what they want, when they want, how they want. So they can get that. You've got to think broadcast television must seriously be under pressure.
Well, I mean, it's weird. My bias, I have in the past worked in marketing. I was spectacularly bad at it, but I have respect for people who weren't. Every now and again, a well-crafted advert, I'll still watch it once. and that may or may not be enough. As I say, the Titanfall advert, it stuck in the mind enough for me to bring it up. It's been days since I last saw it. I just thought it looked good, and I thought it was very clever. In the same way that the other great example of that was the Aldi advert, the spoofing the Calvin Klein underwear one, with the bloke with the high voice talking about different prices of champagne. Just nicely done, and that was about a 20-second ad as well. That was really very clever indeed.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I miss.
That sort of thing.
I'll tell you what I miss. I miss the adverts at the local cinema for
the local adverts
for the
not
local
actual
companies.
Adverts. One for
Those
Stavros' kebabs, 10 yards from the cinema.
Yeah,
10 doors down.
Those were classic. So you can find some of them on YouTube. If you do some search on YouTube with the old Pearl and Dean trailer at the start, and then they're really
footage.
badly produced local commercials.
It was the same bit of stock footage, and then a place card and a crappy voiceover, and that was it.
Yeah.
Every single one. Yeah, I do miss those. Unfortunately, the only place I do have to watch adverts is at the cinema, which really pisses me off because I've just paid money to get into the cinema. Why am I sitting through adverts at all? And then, of course, if you're watching more than one film in a day or something like that, or even over a couple of weeks, you have to sit through exactly the same adverts over and over again.
I mean, the Americans, it might be noisy during the movies, but the 2 or 3 presentations that I've been to in the States in cinemas, no advertising.
No, they would
fantastic.
absolutely, Americans will not accept that. They said that we're paying to see a movie. They don't mind advertising on TV. It's free. That's the price you pay. Effectively, it's free, but you've got to put up with advertising. If you're paying to sit in a cinema, there's no way they're going to sit through advert breaks, and I don't blame them at all. That's what pisses me off. Why am I watching adverts when I've just paid £10 to watch this film? It's
Steve,
outrageous.
have you got a drink with you?
Oh yeah, go out, I suppose, and come back in.
No. I'm not talking about that. As we're talking on this podcast, have you got a drink with you?
No,
because
no,
if you don't, I'd recommend that you poured yourself a stiff one and CTFD.
Yeah, the only other thing is I'm going to pull you up on that argument because you haven't paid a tenner to get in. You got one of those cinema passes.
Well, no, not in my case, but generally.
It's the principle.
It's the principle.
Well, no, it is the principle.
I could have spent a tenner.
Why are you showing adverts in something you paid to sit in anyway?
Yeah, unlimited pass, and we're still waiting for a review of the One Direction movie.
Yeah, you might have to wait a long time for that.
Right, is that the games news done?
Yeah, that's games news.
Such as it was.
Plug the podcast then.
Yeah, so let's go back to hardware because we didn't cover everything. Right, so we're back to hardware in a sec. 2 quick stories. Onkyo launched a new range of budget AV receivers, Steve. Ultra HD compatible. Not a lot else on there. Considering it's Onkyo and they like to put every bell and whistle on their stuff.
I think they probably run out of things to put on them. I mean, the last review receivers that I saw of theirs, they did have a hell of a lot of features. I mean, those, how they put the little logos along the front. I mean, they were running out of space, frankly. So they got in 2 new receivers, the TX-NR535, which is 5.2 channel, and there's a 7.2 channel TX-NR636. The big deal is that they can handle 4K 60 hertz video. They also have HDCP 2.2, which is a definite step up because they did have 4K upscaling on their previous receivers, but they couldn't even pass 4K, even the old 4K up to 30 hertz. So that's a step up on their part. I think their previous approach was slightly short-sighted, but I guess the idea is you add more features and then sell another load of receivers. Other than that, though, you're right, Phil. I mean, the actual feature set's pretty standard. There's not much in there that's, I think, apart from the 4K support, I think there's anything that's not available already on other receivers.
Okay.
Price-wise, the 636 is 500 quid. And the 535 is £400. So I guess in that point of view, they're quite good value. I mean, I'm quite amazed at how cheap a lot of receivers are these days, considering what's in them.
A nice industrial design as well. It's not like to scare the horses.
I've got to say, Onkyo really are ugly, and I say that as someone who has a 5007 in his system. They are ugliest thing, I think.
It makes no apologies for what it is. It's quite logical. Lots of buttons rather than chasing through menus. If you haven't got the remote to hand, there's normally the button on the front to make it stop or start doing what you're hoping it to do, which I think is potentially advantageous.
Okay, and we talked about Auro 3D last week on the podcast. Just something that I found as I was going through doing a little bit of research because we wanted to find out if Atmos was going to be as easy to implement in the home. And a little bit of information that I found, Stephen, I was discussing this with you this afternoon, is Steinway Lingdorf and Denon and Marantz are partners. And the rumour is that we're going to see AVRs later in the year with Auro 3D at reasonable prices.
Yeah, I mean, that's. I guess it's inevitable that it will filter down into lower priced products and start being included on AV receivers. The question is obviously when and how cheap it'll actually be compared to what it's currently priced at, which is what, 10 to £15,000. I guess anything's going to be cheaper than that. But yeah, it looks like Denon and Marantz could well be the first ones out of the gates with Auro capabilities on their receivers. And I think that's going to be good news, particularly as we discussed last week. This is not that difficult to implement. It's not like adding 2 arrays of speakers over your head. You can add make a significant difference to your sounds, to the sound system and the sound stage, if you like, around you, just by adding these 4 additional height speakers in the front and rears. So I think that's good news. Yeah,
it'd be interesting. Right, to wrap up, Sony HW55, that's their budget projector. Always good value for money, these projectors, Steve, even though everything on them is manual.
Yeah, I mean, it's £2,800. You get 2 pairs of glasses in there, although they are RF glasses. They are IR glasses and not RF glasses, which is unusual these days. And I've got to say, I really wish Sony would redesign the glasses. I watched The Hobbit in 3D, the extended cut, and I've got to say, these glasses were killing my head after about an hour. They're so uncomfortable. They really pinch the bridge of your nose. But otherwise, it's a cracking budget projector. I say budget. I guess it's their budget projector. Obviously, a lot of people would consider, below £1,000 as budget, but in terms of Sony's range of projectors, this is their entry-level model. It's in the same sort of price bracket as the JVC X35 and the Epson TW9200, apart from the fact it has a manual lens shift, zoom and focus. It is a really well-specified projector. It's got a full CMS, 2-point white balance control, has a reality creation in there. It's got a dynamic iris. It's a great little performer. The blacks aren't as good as the JVC, obviously, even when you use the dynamic iris, I have to say. But I do think it is a very capable performer. And although I can't really see many major differences between this model and the one that was before, the HW50, it's still interesting that Sony continued to produce an entry-level projector, because certainly JVC, for example, haven't this year. They've continued to just produce the X35, although that is a very good projector. I think if I was being asked which one would I choose between the two, given that I use a scope screen, I would definitely go for the JVC, because I think having a motorized lens feature and a lens memory feature are valuable additional features for me personally. If you didn't use a scope screen and weren't too concerned about that, then obviously the fact that Sony's manual isn't such a big deal. In terms of performance, it produces a really nice picture. 3D is very good, if you're still interested in that. It's all around. It's a really solid, very capable projector in the sort of £2,500 to £3,000 price bracket.
Okay, and the review for that will be up probably in time for this podcast going up as well. So go and check that out. We'll be back in a sec with movie news. Okay, so let's start movie news with what's at the cinema, Steve.
This week it's Need for Speed, which, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong here, is based upon a video game, although I'm not actually aware of this video game.
Sure to be a sign of quality.
Yes.
It's a sign of something.
I'll say one thing for Need for Speed. They did all the stunt work, and the practical car effects are done for real. They're not CG, and they are really impressive. There is some amazing stunt work in this film that looks incredible. The problem is they spent a lot of time doing the stunts and no time at all working on a plot, screenplay, or decent characterization. What you're left with...
What cars are in it, Steve?
If you're a petrol head, it's an absolute wet dream of a movie in terms of the cars that are in it. But I don't know any of these cars. Well, there's the main car in it is a Ford Mustang. It's a Shelby Mustang. So it was within the context of the story.
Is that the GT5? Is that the GT500?
See, this is where it's weird. It's the Shelby sort of approved Ford platform Mustang, because bizarrely, the Shelby Foundation, because obviously Carroll Shelby is dead, they make a Mustang all of their own. But Ford's one is the GT500. Shelby makes something called the GT350, which, despite having a smaller number, is far more terrifying. But that's by the by. Sorry.
Okay. Well, within the context of the story, it was the last one that Carroll Shelby worked on before he died, apparently.
Bollocks.
Yeah, obviously it's bollocks. If you think that's bollocks, wait till we get on to the rest of the film. So, I mean, okay, let's go through the plot for a second, what such as it is. You've got Aaron Paul, who most famously is in Breaking Bad. He plays a guy called Toby, who is a racer, street racer, but also runs a garage where they do, exotic car tuning and that kind of stuff. And his sort of enemy, a guy called Dino, played by Dominic Cooper. Why they're enemies isn't really made that clear, although I think it's because he pinched Toby's ex-girlfriend, who's now engaged to. But he turns up and offers him to completely renovate this Shelby Mustang, and he'll give him a percentage of the sale price. And so he renovates it, and then up turns Imogen Poots, who's playing this English girl who is a exotic car buyer for a rich guy. Toby claims that he can get the car to do 234 miles an hour. Dominic says it's not possible. He takes on to a racetrack, proves that he can. And then because he feels slighted, Dominic Cooper's character challenges into a street race. And they're using, hang on, I have to look up this because
There's a Veyron, isn't there?
No, that's later. That's later.
Okay, fine.
This street race, hang on, let me just pull up the name of this car because I can't even pronounce it.
Is it Koenigsegg?
Yeah, the
Koenigsegg. Yeah.
Koenigsegg, yeah. What were they called?
Koenigsegg. It's the one that Stig crashed.
They're made in Sweden, and bizarrely, you can buy one of them which runs entirely on alcohol, which I approve of.
That's what you run on, isn't it, Ed?
Yes, it is, except I can't do over 200 miles an hour. So I think the Koenigsegg's doing better than me.
Yeah, that was the one that nearly killed the Stig, basically.
They have a race using 3 Koenigsegg AVRs.
Yes.
AVRs. So there's Toby, there's Dino, and also a guy called Little Pete, who is Toby's friend and little brother of Dino's girlfriend, Toby's ex-girlfriend. Right, so they have a massive race, street race, and you know this is not going to end well. And also, you're watching the film thinking, right, they're driving through streets with pedestrians and other cars on them at like 200 miles an hour. This is unbelievably reckless and dangerous. Now, within the context of a video game, maybe that's fine, but within a narrative of a movie, which is meant to be slightly more realistic.
But isn't that every car chase movie?
No, because they just seem so completely cavalier about it. And you find it really difficult to actually empathise with the characters. You're thinking, like, you deserve to go to jail. You're an idiot.
You see, Mark, I have to point this out. In the original Fast and the Furious, which, as we all know, is the benchmark by which all of these others are judged, they do. There's actually, if you like, it's a 2-minute siege of them closing it down.
I'm just thinking traditionally, Bullet, French Connection,
that's baddie being chased by cop. That's different.
Yeah.
Street racing.
This is just idiots racing and putting other people's lives.
Well, my question is, how the hell did they manage to afford to have 3 Koenigsegg?
Oh, well, within what you really want to know? Because basically Dino's uncle owns 3 of them. I mean, not just 1, 3, right? So they have a 3 Koenigsegg.
As you
do.
That
with Alfa Romeos, but it seems overkill with Koenigsegg's.
Yeah.
Anyway, Toby gets banged up for manslaughter, which frankly he deserved to be. And then gets out after 2 years, and then he wants to get revenge on Dino because Dino has set him up. And in order to do that, he wants to enter a race called hang on. What's the De Leon race, right? Which is a winner-takes-all exotic supercar race organised by a guy called Monarch, played by Michael Keaton.
Are you sure this wasn't an episode of Towie or something you've accidentally
It does sound like Towie.
It does feel like some sort of LSD-fevered flashback dream is what it starts to feel like. When you start trying to describe the plot to somebody. The film's over 2 hours long, which it didn't need for a kickoff.
You've spent longer describing this than they spent writing it.
Writing it, definitely. So then he has to get across America. So he has to get from New York to San Francisco in 48 hours in the Shelby Mustang with Imogen Poop sitting in the right seat in order to be accepted to take part in this race. He goes across America, right? He's being chased by like half the police force of the United States. He crosses state border, which means therefore it's a federal offence, whatever he's doing. So we would be after the FBI after him as well. You think in the modern day and age, in a distinctive car, he's going to get caught pretty quickly. But somehow he makes it all the way across America and gets to San Francisco, and there's no one waiting for him. At no point did the police ever deploy those things. What are they called, Phil? Where you put across the road with spikes.
Stinger.
Time. Yeah, they don't ever deploy those, which would seem like a pretty obvious thing. At one point, a cop, to stop one of the other cars in the race bit, the De Leon race, puts his car into accelerate, pushes down the accelerator with a stick and then lets it go, lets the handbrake go and shoots it into one of the other cars. That's a very effective police method for stopping a speeding car, I think. It's just utterly, utterly ludicrous. At one point, one of his friends, who's, but after all, he's been in prison for 2 years, has got a job working in some boring office. He gives him a call and says, "Come and join my team again." So the guy takes off all of his clothes and walks out bollock naked out of the building for no obvious reason whatsoever. It's just.
To be fair, I did that at Yamaha. I didn't really, but I'd like to.
I think you were probably glad you didn't, Ed.
Yeah.
It's so basically it's got no plot, no characters, spectacular stunts, which unfortunately have been largely wasted on a film. It's just so vacuous and empty. It's just, and you also feel that morally it's just slightly ambiguous because, well, not even ambiguous, it's just morally, corrupted, because you feel that why would you possibly empathise with people who are doing something so reckless and dangerous and stupid all the time?
No,
come on, then, marks out of 10. Don't leave us hanging.
How Toby thinks his plan to get revenge and prove his innocence involves destructively driving across the whole of America, where at the end of it he gets 6 months. By the way, he would have got like 20 years for what he did. I gave it 6 out of 10, and that's mostly for the stunts. And if you like stunts and you like the game and you're a petrol head, you'll probably enjoy it.
I think more the petrol head side of things. I think
if you're a petrol head, you'll probably dig that kind of element of the film. If you're anything other than those, you're going to be bored to tears.
Now, this is a serious question. Do they make these car movies the same as they used to? And I'm thinking the likes of Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball Run and, the old fun films of the golden age of what we'd say would be the car movie. The road trip movie or the being chased by the cops. The one where all the cops smash into each other and you get I think they started making fun of it deliberately in these films because it would start with 3 cop cars all landing on each other, and I think by the end of it was 98 cop cars all piling up and
I think there's that famous in Blues Brothers when they've got hundreds of police cars chasing them.
Exactly. I mean, those were fun movies, but there was an element of plot to them. Smoking the Bandit, it was trying to get alcohol across state lines, which amazingly was still illegal in the 70s. You couldn't transport beer from state to state, and which quite
I think that's one of the problems with the film. It is missing that element of fun. I mean, certainly Dominic Cooper's having fun. He's playing a villain that's borderline pantomime. He might as well be twirling a moustache. And Imogen Poots seems to be enjoying herself, and she's quite cute in it, which makes it acceptable. But Aaron Paul, he was in an effort to appear intense, looks like a psycho most of the time, and you don't feel like you're really having as much fun as you should be. You can kind of forgive some of the reckless behaviour if it was done in a comic way, but the fact is that the stunts are so good, and the practical effects are so visceral that it makes you more aware of the fact that this is really dangerous.
There's one shot in the advert that I see on the TV, of the Shelby coming towards the camera, and it looks CGI. So.
No, it's not. I mean, honestly, the only things in it that I could see were definitely CGI with some of the flames. Some of the flame stuff was obviously CGI, but otherwise, all the car work is all practical. There's a brilliant bit where they did actually put the actors through driving lessons, for certain scenes, which they were allowed to do, within the insurance, obviously, of the film itself. But there's one where Aaron Paul does actually skid the car out towards the camera and gets out the door, and that was him that did it, apparently. And that does look quite cool. So yeah, I mean, the stunt work's incredible, but it's just unfortunate these stuntmen are risking their lives for such a vacuous, pointless film.
Okay, so it's not going to be an Oscar winner like Fast and the Furious then.
I find the Fast and the Furious had the sensibility to realise that actually racing cars was a bit boring ultimately, and they needed to do something else. So they added in things. Maybe they became heist movies.
And also
they brought in The Rock.
And one of the strongest homoerotic relationships ever committed to celluloid.
Absolutely, definitely. But I mean, I think also that Fast and Furious has got quite an interesting cast of characters in it. Need for Speed doesn't have an interesting cast of characters in it, unfortunately. It desperately wants to be a new Fast and Furious franchise, but it's not. I mean, looking at its box office from the weekend in the States, it was beaten by Sherman and Mr. Peabody, and in the cinema I was in, admittedly it was a sunny day. It was in the evening, but admittedly it had been a really nice day on Sunday. But there was about 6 of us in the entire cinema, which I thought was, for opening weekend was pretty small.
I've just read that the cars aren't real.
Well, no, they're
not real cars.
Like
they're
rolling,
obviously
rolling shells.
Yeah. But they are physical.
I was going to say, I mean, if you've got a,
you're not smashing up a 3 million motor,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Because there is in the Leon race at the end, there is a Bugatti. Is it the
Bugatti Veyron?
Bugatti Veyron's in there. Yeah, there's I mean, it's about sort of 20 million quid, technically 20 million quid worth of cars in that race. There's only 6 cars in it. But obviously, they're not using the actual cars. But even the sort of the replicas are like 300 grand a pop, so not cheap.
Okay, so
I don't know how it compares to the game, by the way, Mark, because obviously I haven't played it. But it looks like a game, basically. I mean, there's whole bits when they're during the race, they're showing like on iPads and computer screens, as they're moving around the course, which just looks like a section on a game, and it is a bit like watching someone else play a video game sometimes, which again is pretty boring.
I'm not even going to rise to that. Yeah.
No, watching someone else play is not much fun, is it? It's more, the whole idea is to play yourself.
I'm sure you're an expert at playing with
yourself. Yeah. Did you say Imogen
Poots? In the third, I think this is the 3rd film I've seen her in 5 months. She's in Filth. She was in That Awkward Moment a few weeks ago, and now she's in this. And she's got another film out next week with Aaron Paul again.
She was in That Awkward Moment. That makes
I was going to say.
Yeah, more awkward for her than me, I suspect.
As you were.
But I think she's going to be a big star, that girl. She's going places.
Okay, thanks for that, Steve.
Seal of approval.
Yeah.
Okay.
Never heard of again.
Blu-ray is released this week. Catching Fire, Escape Plan, The Counsellor, Blue is the Warmest Colour. We've reviewed all of them. They're all up on the site now if you want to go and read the reviews. So we're going to keep this short because the reviews are up there. Which one would you recommend people buy, Steve?
Well, the obvious one is going to be Catching Fire. It's the second Hunger Games movie. Great disc, lovely picture. Apart from one thing, it's one of those annoying movies with multiple aspect ratios. The Hunger Games sequences were shot with IMAX cameras. So basically it's 2.35 to 1 until the Hunger Game itself starts, and then it switches to 1.85 to 1. And then after the Hunger Game is ended, it goes back to 2.35 to 1 again, which really pissed me off. I really hate it when it does that. Christopher Nolan's got a lot to answer for there. But otherwise, in terms of picture quality, sound quality, extras, it's superb. Great film too, really enjoyed it. Escape Plan's good laugh. Schwarzenegger and Stallone. If you haven't seen it, it's the kind of thing you definitely want to... I mean, I don't know if you want to buy it.
£7 on Amazon.
Can't go wrong then, £7. The Counsellor, Avoid Like the Plague. It's got to be, given the pedigree of the film, Ridley Scott, Cormac McCarthy writing it, the cast, Javier Bardem, Cameron Diaz, Michael Fassbender, Brad Pitt, how all those people managed to make something so bad is beyond me. Blue is the Warmest Colour is my personal choice of those 4 films. It's a French movie about a relationship between 2 girls. It's very sexually explicit, but it is absolutely brilliant. It's one of those rare films, I think, that really stays with you a long time after you've seen it because it's emotionally affecting. It's really well. The acting is absolutely brilliant in it. It won the Palme d'Or, and unusually they gave it to the director and the 2 actresses because I think they were so important in terms of the success of the movie. But I think it's a brilliant film, and if you're broad-minded and not going to be easily offended, it's worth watching. It does have a 15-minute lesbian sex scene. Let's put it that way.
Right, okay, so that kind of wraps up movies. We need to do a little bit of housekeeping before we finish this evening. So first of all, next week's podcast will not be going out on Wednesday. It's likely to be Thursday or Friday because myself and Steve are heading to Amsterdam on next Monday for the Panasonic convention. It's a yearly thing. It's a bit late this year. It's normally in February. They moved it to March. No plasma TVs. So it's going to be interesting to see, in terms of TVs, what Panasonic's plans are. I think we can guess it's going to be 4K LED LCD TVs, and they're going to give us some marketing waffle about how LED now has a picture quality the same as plasma. Interesting that they say that now that they stopped making plasma. So
I'm sure that's just a coincidence, Phil.
I'm sure it is just a coincidence, Stephen, not marketing waffle. But we will be able to see them next Monday and then hopefully get them in for a review shortly after that. So that's why the podcast will be late next week, so don't expect us to be there on Wednesday. It's going to be Thursday or Friday before we publish. The other thing is the Cracker Challenge. Ed, you got your video?
I've been doing some work. I have to say, I do firmly agree with the gentleman that posted in the last podcast thread. I'm confident from some initial experiments. It's 3 that's the challenge. 2's doable. It's doable sober. You know,
if you think you can do 3, do 3 then in a minute.
Well, we'll see. I don't know. I was looking interested. There was an article that appeared on Cracked this week of a bloke that did 5 of these stupid online challenges, so you don't have to. You know, the spoonful of cinnamon.
Yeah, well, that's the next one for you.
No, not a chance. The cinnamon one is just ruinous. The wasabi one looks more interesting, but I mean that's of more interest to me because I always like those insane wings challenges on Man vs Food, and I only have 5 remaining taste buds, which means I'm kind of well prepped for those sort of things. So
now remember, you're not allowed any liquids when you do this, and it has to be videoed. And that was the same challenge to the lad that posted on the forum post as well.
I think he did that.
It has to be videoed. You have to video it. It's no good coming on.
I liked his reply. Do you really want to see a fat man eating crackers? And I'm thinking, well, they've asked for me to do it. In for a penny, in for a pound.
No, I want to see a fat man failing to eat 2 crackers in a minute.
Oh, what can I say?
Right. Okay. So yeah, rather than speaking about this, let's try and crack it off for now. Let's try and have it next week. Is that possible?
I'll see what I can do. Yeah.
Okay, and just I'll give you the address to send the video footage, and we'll make sure the video footage accompanies the podcast when it goes out. And that's it for this week's AVForums podcast. I need to thank Steve Withers.
What's Belgium famous for? Chocolates and child abuse, and they only invented the chocolates to get to the kids.
Mark Botwright.
I have the capacity to change.
And Ed Selley.
Altogether, I had 5 pints of beers and 6 bottles. No, 6 pints of beers and 7 bottles. And you know what? I'm not even pissed.
Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark avforums.com for the latest reviews, news and video. Plus, you can leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. And also just remember, we're not here next Wednesday. It's going to be Thursday or Friday. So I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.